Hi everyone, I'm Zach Reinhardt, and welcome back to another EP wrap-up! Woo! The EP wrap-up is an irregular series I do whenever I have just a few EPs, or in this case this week, mini albums, that I just think are worth sharing and passing on to you guys if you're interested. And this week we've got some indie pop and some indie pop because it's that time of year. Starting us off this week, we have the new Chai mini album, I Gotoh CDs, or I Gotoh series. Chai is a 4-piece power pop band, I guess, with a little bit of hip hop and punk mixed in there for good measure. And this is their second release, though this is my first time listening to them. They were recommended to me by the folks over at the Japan 2.0 podcast, so shout outs to them, I guess. And this thing's pretty solid from front to back. I really love this just super catchy verse and the really liberal use of vocal harmony that shows up on this track and also through the rest of the tracks on here. The vocal harmonies all sound really great, though the vocals themselves are a bit amateurish, I will admit. The groove is really solid as well, and I like the production's boomy, kind of loud, in-your-face aesthetic, even if at times I think it goes a little overboard. They go a little bit kind of old-school punk, maybe a little bit of Shonen Knife in here on the track Boys Seko Men, but with a distinctly modern take on it. And they get downright hip-hop on the song Birubanno, which, if it weren't for the power pop chorus, would be pretty much just a straight up hip hop song. And the final track, Sayonara Complex, is really solid as well. It shows that they can pull off a slower, more smooth, and honestly kind of soulful track, especially during that middle section on the song. This thing is pretty solid. I do have some complaints. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the synthesizers on this thing, especially on track 2, Cool Cool Vision. But overall, it's a pretty fun, lighthearted, kind of power pop piece that doesn't take itself too seriously, but is a pretty enjoyable listen. I definitely recommend you check it out if this sounds up your alley. Next up, we've got the new Regal Lily release, a new mini album from them called The Radio. I was a fan of Regal Lily's last mini album, The Post, but this one tries my patience a bit more, but it still definitely has some highlights. The opening track, Transistor Radio, is, if a bit typical, still a nice, succinctly written pop song, and the almost early Number Girl-esque bits of jam we get on the track Tokyo Tower all sound really great. But it really falls apart for me on the last 3 tracks, the last half of the album. It's 6 tracks long, because they're all like slower ballads, and some of them are all right, but when you just push them all together like that, it really tries my patience. They're also some of the longer songs on the album. I don't know, the production is just a bit too clean, a bit too sterile, and there's just not enough variation between the tracks to keep me interested. But if you're just looking for some indie pop to listen to this summer and chill out to, it's a decent add to your playlist. But an even better add to your playlist is the new Homecomings mini album, Symphony. The opening track, Play Yard Symphony, is kind of the single of the mini album. It got a music video and all that, and it's an alright track. It has some nice strings and what sounds like maybe glockenspiel faintly in the background, and it's a decent, pretty typical Homecomings track, though I do like the chord-based guitar solo in the song. It has some nice contrary motion between these kind of layered guitar parts that I think makes for an interesting solo. Overall, the track is solid, but nothing really new or special or outstanding for the band. But when it comes to the Homecomings, the best tracks are always in the deeper cuts, and this thing does not disappoint in that regard. Track 2, Slacker, is one of my favorite Homecomings tracks I've heard in a while. It has a really nice kind of fuzzy guitar tone, and while the verse isn't great, the chorus is. It has this great little descending, really slickly performed guitar line that plays like counter melody to the already really catchy vocal line. The chorus just has a lot of energy and a lot of presence in the song, and it leaves an impact. I really remember the chorus to that song very well after listening to it. And it has a nice guitar solo in it and some good vocal harmony usage, kind of used rather conservatively, but well used throughout the song. Track 4, Welcome to My Room, is another really solid track from the Homecomings here. We get this bouncy guitar that emphasizes the beats 2 and 4 in a way that almost feels like syncopation at the very beginning, and then the whole rest of the band really follows that lead throughout the rest of the song. Beats 2 and 4 are really strongly emphasized. And we also get this really nice touch of like 16th note swing, which makes the whole song just feel a bit more energetic and bouncy and drives the song forward. But the song kind of has this bittersweet, almost sad tone, somewhat nostalgic tone, and I could almost call it a sad song if it weren't for the fact that the lyrics directly say that this is not a sad song. But I like the juxtaposition there, and it gives the whole song this unique flavor that isn't just your typical indie pop track, even though they are just working with the same typical indie pop sound palette. They have managed to make this song unique and stand out in very subtle ways, which I really appreciate. There's some nice songwriting going on here. And then the final track on here, track 5, is a remix of the first song, Playard Symphony, by someone called Bushmind, who I assume is a really kind of useless superhero that can talk to bushes or something. And Bushmind basically takes this pretty tame kind of indie pop song and takes it in this really psyched out direction with a little bit of an homage to like old school big beat sounds as well. There's a really fat synth bass on here, and the beat is like almost a break beat, but it's kind of made out of similar kind of dirty drum samples, but isn't quite as crazy energetic as your typical break beat. And man, he just went crazy with effects on here. There's all sorts of phasers and flangers and weird modulating synthesizers going on. The whole thing has this really psyched out kind of spacey edge, but it still is recognizably the song Playard Symphony, as he keeps mostly the vocal melody and progression and structure of the song the same, though he does do some kind of cutting of vocals and some weird effects things. I am intrigued by what he's done here, but I don't really feel that it stands out as its own song. I feel it really depends upon being viewed as a remix of Playard Symphony rather than it kind of using Playard Symphony to make something that stands on its own. But overall, I think it's a pretty solid remix. I think it's an interesting listen, and I do think it's a nice closer for the mini-album. And the mini-album on a whole is just the Homecomings doing more solid indie pop. They're not really straying from their original sound very much, but they are subtly experimenting. They're subtly trying new things. There are these little touches of just something we haven't heard before, and it's just enough to keep their music familiar and interesting at the same time. I'm still looking forward to whatever the Homecomings are doing next, and hope you guys are too. And yeah, if you want to give any of these EPs a listen, I've got something down in the description, that's what it's called, to direct you to like a music video or something. And I'll see you guys next week for probably a review. Peace.